Melinda, how are you?
Good, how are you?
Doing great. Thanks for jumping on. It's good to talk to you.
My pleasure. Thanks for asking me.
Yeah. So yeah, I randomly have been. I'm a UX designer, but I've been really getting into like brand strategy. Of course, like watching a ton of YouTube. Your name is always at the top of the list, which is great. So I just wanted to kind of pick your brain a little bit about like brand strategy. Maybe talk a little bit about UX design. I'm really interested in your process. Is like kind of the main thing I'd be interested in. But yeah, do you mind giving like an intro to a lot of my Instagram followers who tend to be a little bit more technical, some designers, but I think brand strategy is something that could definitely play into the similar process that we have.
Yeah, definitely. So just to give you a little background, I studied graphic design and illustration. So I went into my first job just solely as a graphic designer.
Yeah,
That's what I wanted to do. I didn't know any different or any better. And so just wanted to be a designer. So I got an in-house design job right out of school. I was
yeah,
there on and off for about 7 years. So I freelanced in between. I went back there in a different department. I ended up in their branding department, and it was a small team of about four of us. And that's where I totally fell in love with branding. And I didn't even know that's what I wanted to do. And I didn't know that I was interested in it. So I worked on, gosh, everything from packaging to a lot of logo designs, because they had different sub brands and they named all of their products. They had different logos. And so worked on a lot of logo identity, in-store graphics, outside facades. So just everything that had to do with the brand, not as much marketing and advertising. And
yeah,
then there, they dissolved the creative department. And so I went off on my own, and that was something I've always wanted to do, wanted to work for
yeah,
myself. So then fast forward a couple years, I was still doing branding identity, and I met Christo on The Future.
yeah.
Ended up on the show, so that's probably where,
Yeah, that's one of the spots I first saw you.
yeah. So I was on there, and he introduced me to the wonderful world of brand strategy, which is it just made everything complete in branding. Because when I had started, I was just doing the identity, and then I was relying so much on the client to provide the brief and to provide the direction. Even though I asked questions, it's still just, there were some things that fell flat, and a lot
Right.
of it ended up being superficial because there was just no direction. And then I realized a lot of the companies that I was working for, they didn't do well after a while either. And they didn't know how to connect to their customers. And so we did this branding, but then it never really connected
Yeah,
with,
that makes sense.
yeah. So yeah, I've been doing brand strategy now, adding it to my identity services. It's now over a year that I've been doing it. And so it's just changed my entire branding process.
Yeah, I love that background too, because a lot of people always, message me. I was a graphic design. I did like advertising and graphic design as well. So I think brand strategy is like a very obvious fit for people that are, very visually, like, can make really good visual logos, branding, etc. I think UX is another one, which is a little bit more getting into like, the process of improving an interface, going through, rapid iteration to make small incremental changes to, make technology more human. So I love that there's like graphic design is like like a lot of people started there. And then I think it was like, how can we diversify this and make ourselves a little bit more marketable? So I totally like that the process how you got to where now that you have your own company, I think is like really inspiring for a lot of people. For me personally, I'm just very curious how you went from freelance to deciding like, hey, I think I'm onto something here, and actually like, launching a company. Because I think that's really, there's so like freelance. I was just listening to a podcast about how it's just growing dramatically globally. People want to be their own boss. But how do you take what, your process, your energy, your passion, and then ultimately make a company around it?
Yeah, so I would consider myself like in between. I'm still trying to figure out that place between
Yeah.
being a freelancer and being a full-fledged agency. So that's why I'm kind of in this, I'm a consultancy.
Yeah.
It's me, and this is how I think of it. I don't know if it's the technical definition for it, but to me, it's smaller and it's expert status, right? And so when I think of agency, I think of they're just pumping out a ton of work,
Yeah.
where they're experts, freelance, they're hired hands. That's how I define it in my head. So when I was a freelancer, so when I left that in-house job, I was just like, oh, I just got to pay the bills. Like, I want to do it on my own. I want to be a freelancer, but I just got to pay the bills. So I'd hop around from agency to agency doing freelance work, or I would take on freelance work remotely. So about 6 months in, I realized, okay, what am I going to do? Like, this is not sustainable, unless I just have workers that keep hitting me up and I hop from agency to agency, which I know a lot of freelancers do, and that's fine. But that's not necessarily the life that I wanted. I really did want to hone in on getting branding and brand identity projects. And so what I figured was, okay, well, I need a name. So I just started with business name, and then marketing myself more as a business. So I still technically operated as a sole proprietor, but I shifted the positioning to that consultancy. It's more expert. Like, this is what we do. We don't just do every graphic design project known to man. We are really doing brand identity. And so I would only show that work. And I had that business name. And so then I started marketing myself as a business versus just, hey, Melinda can fit any role. Right? Yeah,
that makes total sense. And I think like a real quick side story on like brand identity that I think, this is like where I got my first exposure to it and the importance of it. So I used to work for General Electric. They were going through like a massive reorg, and they were like spinning off a lot of their businesses. So one of the businesses that I was in was GE Retail Finance. So the challenge is that like, hey, we want to spin off this business as its complete separate entity. So basically, how can so the branding challenge, which I got a little bit of exposure to, but I just found it incredibly interesting, was how can we create the same reliability as well as being different in an industry that's been around forever. So that company eventually became Synchrony Financial. They picked like a yellow is like a very rare color for a lot of the other banking companies. But the main takeaway, the reason that I tell that story is that the people and the amount of energy that went into picking the name, the color scheme, everything that had to do with like the actual brand was critical. And I think it actually was like the first thing to make people that, left these previous GE employees feel a part of something. So that was like me being a part of a brand identity. And I think it was like kind of my first taste of it. So I wanted to get your take on a little bit on the process. I know like a lot of people probably pay you a lot of money to do that, but if you could just give me like a taste of what your process looks like, especially if it was like, like maybe even how you came up with your company name, like just something simple and maybe one of your earlier clients that wasn't as complex as like something you're currently working on.
Yeah. So first off, the company name, are you talking about my own?
Yeah. Just like
I had no process for that. It was more like, okay, what do? I create identity I really do market to the more creative person. So whether that is an interior designer, a fashion designer, lifestyle. So to me, they're creative entrepreneurs still.
Right.
But I thought, okay, well, I create logos, which are marks for other creative entrepreneurs who are makers, right? So it's not a spinoff from the whiskey.
Yeah.
And that was the one that stuck. I had so many names, and it was one of those you just keep thinking of names and thinking of metaphors over a month or two. And that was the one that was easiest to spell, and all of the handles were open. So it's like, get the Instagram handle and the URL, just do it, get it. So that was not there. But for brand strategy, so I learned the core framework from the Future. So you might know a lot about that on the channel, on the Future. So they do sell core, and it was a great starting point for me. So I learned that. I learned it with a lot of friends that are in the pro group, the Future pro group, people from the world that are starting their own creative businesses or have been in business for a while. And so we learned it together. We'd hop on Zoom calls together and go through the framework, and then actually do strategy for each other and for each other's business, because we were just trying to learn it, but then also we wanted to position ourselves correctly as our own businesses. So that's how I learned it. And then now what it looks like currently, once a client signs on with me, they have to go through brand strategy, because there's no way for me to even do the identity now if we don't do brand strategy, because there's no direction.
Right.
So what my process is, it's a 1 to 2 day in-person workshop. So it's with the client, with usually their decision makers, their stakeholders, or the C-suite. So anyone who's going to have a say, they have to be in the room, because we don't want to create something or miss a goal, a business goal or something like that, that then comes up a month or two later and they're like, oh, we got to change everything, or the messaging is wrong. Then we go through brand exercises to create positioning. If they need a mission statement, we sometimes do that, a value proposition, brand attributes. So we're really trying to get to the backstory of the brand, as well as who are you and how you want to represent yourselves? Who are you in the market compared to all the other competitors? Talk about their competitors, and there's a framework we go through for that. And then from there, we talk about the ideal client, and we do a persona. And so we get very, very specific. We start broad, so we'd say, if you're, who are you attracting? Are you trying to attract more of the same person? Are you trying to open up a different market? If so, let's make a user persona, we call it, of that. I'm sure you're probably familiar with that with UX. So we make that because we want to know the personality, like how I like to think of it, and how I think it was Yo Santosa. She was on The Future a while ago. Great at branding. She's phenomenal. But how she described it was that it's like matchmaking. Like you have the brand and you have the client, and you're trying to make the brand attractive to the ideal client. And so that's the idea. If you know your ideal client, then you know what will attract them. You know what type of personality of the brand will attract them. So we get really specific, like what type of shows they watch, what do they do on their leisure time, how much money do they make, where do they live, everything. We want to know very specifics. We go over their goals, their values, how the brand solves those problems. So we're going more, as compared to UX, we're going just high level, like generally, what is the brand? How does the brand solve that problem? And then we go into a very top level user journey from start to finish, as a person finds the brand all the way to sharing. But again, it's that like the big overarching direction, not super specific. And then we go over goals and prioritization. So from what we know of the brand and we know the clients, what now do we need to do as far as branding is concerned and deliverables to reach your ideal client? So that could be, a lot of times it is identity, it's messaging, it's redo of the website. It could even go as far as redoing their social media. And of these things I don't necessarily do, but we'll put it on the list and we'll use the strategy to inform that. And then I usually will refer them out to specialists that can actually do a really good job. Because I don't want to take
it's crazy how much overlap there is between your process and then like the design sprint process, like the 5-day sprint where it's like map, sketch, decide, prototype, test. That early part, like that user research, there's just such an overlap, like building up personas, going through like, what's your user's goals? Like what does the optimal like journey look like? What are the pain points? So, it's just the more I'm very new to like brand identity. It's always been something that like I'm interested in, whether it's, for me as a personal brand or, before Google, I was doing a lot of freelance helping companies kind of establish their brands. So, I find it really interesting that your process there's a lot of overlap with the UX process. And I think part of the thing I'm interested in a lot of is like trying to like the design sprint's been around for like a couple of years now. I think it's a very valuable way to solve a problem. But one of the things that I think it's the format can always be iterated and improved upon. So like exercises in particular are something that like I like to kind of play around with, test, see what's landing. Is there any like exercises or tasks that you think are very beneficial when maybe like a company is a little younger? Think of like a startup, for example, and they're still trying to, find what their value prop is. Cause I love the use of that. I talk about that a lot as well. Like, is there any like exercise that comes top of mind that you would go through a company that's like trying to like establish what its brand is and what its value prop is? Or should they already know that coming into it?
Yeah, that's a good question. I'm trying to think. The hardest, maybe this will kind of answer the question in a roundabout way.
Yeah.
The things that I find it doesn't work well and come for brand strategy are those that don't even have a clue of their ideal client. So the ones that come to me, and again, I'm dealing with lifestyle. So I'm not doing, you know, anything that like apps or anything that's really solving a very big problem. Mine's more, but if they don't know their ideal client, then it's like, I don't even know what to do with you, because like, what if you don't even know them, then, and you'd be surprised that there's a lot of people that they really don't have an idea of who that person is.
So like, I saw that you guys, is it mostly like physical products? Like, I think that like is a lot of the stuff I saw in the portfolio, right?
So physical products, and now I'm getting into hospitality. So
very cool.
Homes, like I have a home developer right now that I'm working with, and then trying to get into like boutique hotels, restaurants. So really like consumer goods and spaces would be it.
Yeah, and I think like I think your expertise in a vertical is really interesting. Like going super deep. Like I think lifestyle is, you know, like your name is definitely like from a couple Google searches and seeing you on YouTube. I feel like you have a really good grasp on that. So I think that's also interesting that you're trying to pick some other like verticals, like, you know, hospitality is obviously another massive opportunity. Is there any that like you shy away from? I'm just curious on like how you prioritize like where you're going next. I think that's also pretty interesting. Lifestyle makes a lot of sense. But yeah, I just wanted to kind of get your process on like how you pick which vertical you want to tackle next.
Yeah. So every vertical that I am going after falls under the lifestyle, like,
yeah.
So it would be, I started with fashion because I was attracting those people. And so I was like, okay, I'll just do that. And I loved it. I really did. I had a ton of friends that were fashion designers. So I'm like, okay, I'll just do that. Then it moved into, so under lifestyle, that's where home is under there, beauty, hospitality, travel even. And so I feel like I'm just moving through each of those as I'm meeting people. So now that I'm in the home industry, I'm going to just go deep in there and find out. There's going to be a ton of things in there that I didn't even know. And then once I've exhausted that, I'm like, okay, I want to move on to the next, or I meet someone new that opens me up to maybe a boutique hotel. Then I'll go down that direction for a while. So I'm just taking it one step at a time through the lifestyle, you know, umbrella. I shy away from tech.
Got it.
Things for people who've developed apps. I just don't. I don't know. There's something about doing design for lifestyle that I am really attracted to, and I like it and I do it well. And so I'm just going to stick with what I know best. Whereas the tech, it's just nothing ever excited me that much. And a lot of like people develop apps and then they die the day after. Like, this is too
totally.
So.
Yeah, I think it makes total sense. I mean, if you're not passionate about the industry, like, why would you spend your time doing it? So I think it's interesting that like a lot of people reached out in fashion that kind of got you started, and then it was like, I can get totally, you know, some deeper expertise here. So I have like there's a lot of people that reach out on like how to get started. So like if someone was like in college, or maybe not even in college, maybe high school, and they wanted to get into like brand strategy, brand identity, anything in like your wheelhouse, what would your recommendation be for someone to get started?
I feel like I only can recommend what I know, and that was to just start designing, because it's the easiest point of entry. Now, if they really were like bent on doing brand strategy first, then if I could go back in time, I would find a strategist that I really looked up to and wanted to do the work that they wanted to, and see if I could assist them in workshops, to just see, how are these done? Is this something I'm even interested in? See if you maybe could even help them run it. So, because when I was learning strategy, I sat in on a couple of brand strategy meetings with people who were farther along than me, and they'd let me run part of the meeting. And so that I would totally like apprentice under someone if that's what I knew I wanted to do. But it's hard to know as a young designer who has no idea, even if maybe they like design more. And when I did, what's funny is I feel like once I learned strategy, I'm like, oh, this was like, I was supposed to do this. Like, I like design, but strategy it's how my brain works. I'm much more logical and strategic thinking than emotional. And so design, I think, is more emotional. And so once I learned that, I'm like, oh, I wish I would have done strategy earlier. But I don't know if younger designers would even know that about themselves early on.
Yeah, no, I think the one thing that you jumped on that I totally agree with is tough sometimes is like, getting like a mentor, like kind of getting thrown into the mix and just, trying to learn, I think is sometimes difficult, but I think early jobs, you tend to do that, right? Like you're working a lot more for way less, but you just got to kind of bite off as much as you can. And kind of, I think, just being a sponge. I think that's like usually the piece of advice that I give. I always recommend like skills, like, if you're going to use like Adobe, like get really good at all the Adobe suite. Like if you want to get like really good at like interaction design, like find a prototyping tool that you like. So, yeah, I think that's awesome advice. And also like, I know that there's quite people have been jumping in and out from both of but if anybody has questions, like feel free to throw them out there. We'll probably, I only have like one or two more questions. I really appreciate the time. I find this like incredibly fascinating. I could talk about this like all day.
Totally with you. Oh, awesome.
Yeah. I guess like one thing I like to like, in design in particular, is like, celebrating failures as much as like, successes. Is there any mistakes that you think a lot of designers in particular make, like when going through, maybe it's like a logo design or another common task? Like I'd love to hear like common pitfalls that people might fall into.
Well, this is the thing that just popped in my head as you were talking was when I was a younger designer at an in-house job. So this isn't exactly answer the question, but hopefully a little bit. I got way too comfortable and I didn't seek out mentorship or wanting to grow there. I was just irritated and I was mad that I didn't get the right job. And I think that's one thing that I made a mistake of is I always expected my clients to be different instead of me changing first. And that's something that I wish I would have been different. And I wish I would have reached out to mentors when I was at that in-house job. Now, when they're designing something, I don't know common pitfalls. I'm trying to think if there's anything like in a process. Maybe just develop your own process, like figure out. Yeah. But after years, I realized, oh, I have a way of designing. I have a way how I design logos. And I think it's really important to, of course, explore all your options, but also see how you work best. And when you get really good results, what was your process? And start marking that down, because then when a project comes along, you can get more efficient, you can pump it out. And I know that I went through I get freaked out when I get a new design project. I'm like, oh my gosh, it's going to be terrible. Like,
yeah.
And it starts out really good, and then you keep going, and it goes really bad, and you're like, I'm going to quit. I'm not meant for this. Then it goes up, and everything's good. And so once I realized that, I'm like, this is exactly what happens every single project. I mark down my process, and then I just go through that process, and it happens every single time. Like, I can count on it. So I think designers should know what to expect from themselves when they're designing.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think early on I was very, I guess, nervous about feedback. I always like struggled getting feedback and like, having someone be critical. But I think critical feedback is the only way you really grow. Like, I think like at most companies, everyone's like too nice. So when you get someone that can actually really kind of be nitpicking, and like, that's where you can go from like a good designer to like a best in class designer. Someone that's really going to be able to call you out on like the little things. And the other thing that I think you absolutely nailed was the process, like coming up with your own process. There's no one way to get to the end result. So identifying like, what your own individual process looks like takes time. But I think a lot of people you're going to be much better off. You're going to be happier, and you're going to be more efficient when you figure out like, different ways the different ways that you can get basically to the end goal. There's one question. Do you want to try to add strategy to every new job? Do you try to add strategy to every new job? From Jay.
To answer that, I would say every new job is strategy. So that comment, or to make it into a comment instead of a question, that every job, I sell strategy. I don't sell identity. It's identity comes after. Messaging now comes after, because I learned through strategy I can offer that. But yeah, I would say that I don't just sell identity and then tack on strategy. It's like I show the benefits of strategy, and then people want that.
Got it. That's great. Can you explain mind mapping a logo design process? Not, I think.
But I can give my quick process for logo design.
Yeah, why don't you do that? That'd be great.
So once I have all the direction as far as like the strategy, and even before I was doing strategy, I would gather a questionnaire. So I had a questionnaire for my client. I knew who their ideal client was. So once I had a general direction, I heavily rely on words and metaphors. So dictionary, and I would just list out all of the words that came out of, I'd highlight words in their questionnaire that would repeat a lot, or the direction they wanted to take the brand. And then I would start looking them up in the dictionary. I would start writing out more words that were possibly metaphors or descriptive words, or give me a tangible, like if they said, I want my brand to be light and airy and free, then I would think of all the words that are that tangible. So like sunshine and a balloon that's light, like anything that's tangible. I'd write all those words down, and then I would put them in buckets. So I'd start looking at words that either like would form a cool concept together or something, and I'd put them in buckets, and then out of those buckets I would start just drawing in my sketchbook different ideas per those concepts, and then I'd start refining, and then from there it would go into like Illustrator. But I rely heavily on words, and I would also look up on Google Images, like balloon images, if that was one of the words that came up, and just see the shapes, the different shapes that are in there. How is it, what does light look like when it hits it? And so just getting a visual sense of the words that came out of strategy or came out of the questionnaire.
Yeah, that's great. I think that was a great answer to I hope we answered that question. I know it was a little tough. We'll do one more before we let you go. Cool. So this is about the research and discovery phase is super important before kickstarting a rebrand. How do you overcome objections from the C-suite that it's not necessary? How do you overcome objections from the C-suite?
Well, that I feel like, if I'm understanding this question right, so how do I overcome objections from the C-suite that strategy is not necessary?
Yeah, I think that's the question.
I have never had, because by the time I sold strategy, everyone's on board. Like the decision makers are on board by that time. So in the meeting, if there's someone that is not sure what's going on, I do start off and say, like, here's why we're here today. Here's our goals that we're trying to accomplish because of this. This is your business. These are your business goals you told me about that we're trying to accomplish. And so I walk them through pretty much what was said in the sales meeting so that everyone's on the same page, and then walk them through why we're doing strategy and the whole point of it and what's supposed to come out of it. And so that's me aligning everyone. And so that's how to avoid objections. I've never actually had an objection once they've agreed to strategy. Everybody usually was on board with whoever made that final decision. So I think
I think that's a great answer. All right, one quick one. Melinda, you have been successful at packaging your logos to make them look more premium. Could you take a moment and explain your process in presenting that work on your site? I agree with that. I think you do a really good job displaying the actual assets that you created. Oh,
thank you. Well, I had a big shift actually after I started going on Chris's show on the future. I had a different brand, like same name, but different look of my brand and a different way to present my work. And when Chris said, look at some designers or companies, agencies that you admire and do what they're doing. Present like they're presenting. And what are they doing better than you? Why do they look more premium than you? And then it woke me up and I thought, oh gosh, let me look. And so I started looking farm design is a huge, huge, huge inspiration for me. I know Aaron over there, and he's phenomenal. But the way he presents their work at farm, I would just look at that, like what's the difference between how he does that and what I'm doing? And then I looked at my work with fresh eyes. I'm like, oh my gosh, there's so much in the case studies. And so then I started looking at all my work as like a story, and like immersing you into the brand and walking you through the story. And so then I started using messaging. I started using better mock-ups. I made sure that the color scheme was very fluid throughout. So when you went to one of my portfolio pieces, you actually got immersed into the brand. And Farm does this really, really well. But I tried to do my own spin on it, especially because I'm in a different vertical. So I have my own style too. And so that's what, getting the color scheme and really playing that out well has totally changed how I present my work, and presenting the logo in different ways, and just almost thinking of it, like a book or a journey. If someone was scrolling through, how could you, because you're designing the layout of your portfolio piece almost like it's its own project. So that really helped. Good question.
Yeah, that was a great question. Cool. I mean, how much more time, Melinda? I want to take you.
I got a few minutes. As long as my phone doesn't die, we're good.
That's usually the cutoff. If the phone dies, like that's a wrap. Cool. Maybe we'll take a few more. What do you think is the best way to stick out and get the most clients? So, like, I guess, like, what's your value prop? As a designer.
So designing for yourself and messaging for yourself is one of the hardest things. I don't want to make light of that. So hard. Right now, I'm describing what I do is I build personalities for brands. And I got to that place because I was trying to describe what I do to people that have no clue what branding is. And so I was at like a family party, and somebody asked, I'm like, hey, I'm going to try this and see if it works. And they're like, oh my gosh, that's so cool. So you probably have to know who the ideal client is. And they totally described my process. I'm like, I'm going to stick with that because she got it after I said that. So I'm going with that right now, that I build personalities for brands. How I get, so what was it? How do I get the most clients? How do I stick out and get most clients?
Yeah.
For me, also because I'm in the lifestyle space, I need to present myself and my brand just as well as I would design it for them, because especially lifestyle and especially fashion, if they see that you can't even brand yourself, they're going to be like, yeah, I don't want to go with you. Like, I'm right. It's almost like having a personal stylist and the stylist doesn't dress well. And you're like, oh, I don't trust you. So because of my aesthetic for one, and then my messaging as well. I've been really working on that. To connect with clients. And then most recently, and what I've been talking about, I have a weekly newsletter that I send out to designers and whatnot. But what I've been talking about has been collaboration. So I just came out with a concept project with a friend from the Future Pro group. It's a cat hater survival kit. So it's just to do for fun. And I'm the client, so I get to decide. And so I'm trying to do things like that, like collaborations. And then I just hosted a pop-up brunch in LA with some creative friends. And so I'm trying to show, like, this is the type of world that I want to live in. And I want clients that are into that kind of stuff, like that think it's funny that I made a cat hater survival kit and they like that. I'm trying to infuse my own personality in everything I do so that I attract the clients that are into that. Because really, I like to work with clients that I would be friends with. And I know not everyone has that mentality, and it's totally fine, but I work well with that. And I love when people have similar interests as me, or they're into the same books or same humor. And so I'm really, really trying to put that out as much as possible into the world so that it attracts the right clients.
Yeah, I think that's awesome. I think that was a great question too. A lot of these are like stuff that I was thinking, but I'm glad people are more articulate than I am. Cool. We'll do one more, and then that newsletter that you mentioned. Is that the one that is in your Instagram bio? Cool. I just signed up for it as well. So I'm excited to start. I'm a part of the fam now.
Yeah, and so Krista told me, you have to document your process, whether that's video, and I'm like, video gives me anxiety. So
Yeah.
I can do that because it's like a journal. And so I've been doing it for almost probably over 6 months now, just every week writing out what my process has been in my business, what I'm thinking, what I'm learning. And it's really helped me, but I've noticed too, it's helping other people follow along and do the same. So yeah, it's in my Insta bio.
Yeah. Cool. I think the thing that's, is super interesting is like I shy away from video as well. I've been enjoying Instagram Live a lot because you have it for like 24 hours to like share content. You can save it, really get sound bites from just like other creative design people. I just like find incredibly fascinating because I think people don't realize there's so much overlap, but you just don't get exposure to it. That's why brand identity is not something that I would say is like, one of my tools in my toolbox. It's something that I think is it's interesting. So just hearing your process hopefully helps, other UXers, even developers, people that are just in the creative space, just like kind of appreciate how someone else's creative process looks, I think is like super, super important. But this has been amazing. I'll let you go. Can you just tell everyone like just where they can find you? I'll link, Melinda's Instagram in my Insta story, but I just wanted anybody else that's following Melinda, where's the best place that they can find you?
Yeah, probably my Instagram. First off, you can get to everything else from there. So Melinda Livsey, and then from there, I have Marks and Maker, which is my branding company, and I also do Freelance, which is an e-course for people who are fresh out of college trying to freelance, and then do a ton of other collaborations and whatnot. And then the future, I'm on there, so you can find it on YouTube. But yeah, Instagram's probably the central hub where they can find me.
Awesome. I'll send everyone there. But thank you so much. This was great. I really enjoyed the combo, and hopefully we can do it again in the future. You can drill me with the questions next time. I always feel bad that I threw so many at you, but you handled it like a champ, so I appreciate it.
I'll have questions for UX because
yeah,
hard to wrap my brain.
Cool. Yeah, I'll get you back on the next one. All right.
Yeah, sounds good.
Cool. Thanks again. Have a great weekend. It was great seeing you.
You too.
Bye.